Welcome, everyone. Nice to have you here. It's pretty amazing being back in person. I don't know about you, but I've done lots of virtual events. I think several people have mentioned there's been lots of virtual events, and it's just pretty amazing to be in environments where people are here and chatting and networking and learning. So really, really happy to be here. Who am I? My name is Hannah. I am a senior product manager at Accurex. I have an MPH, so a master's in public health and global health, and above all else, I love fancy dress. For any Americans in here, that's costume parties. I wish these pictures were bigger, but I'll describe them to you. So on the left is a picture of Dolores, who is an AI robot from a Western simulation in a TV series called Westworld. And on the right is me dressed like Dolores at a robots theme party. Lots of compliments that night. So why I'm here. So we have this vision, this big idea of fundamentally changing how your users interact with your product. Could be that you're doing a pivot or that you're trying to add a new way that your users can use your products. And this is really hard to do. So I'm going to talk about what I've learned in terms of having this ambitious vision and breaking it down into deliverable chunks and what those deliverable chunks are so that you can make progress towards that ambitious vision. So how to do it. Step 1, take small steps. Step 2, do your research. We've talked about this a lot today, especially in the panel just now, all about discovery. And then third, don't take everything a user says at face value. Pooja had a lot of really good points around here in product market fit in terms of taking what your user says, but then digging a little bit deeper. So Accurex, who are we? Accurex is a health tech company. We were founded in 2016. And our products are now used by 98% of GPs in the country, which is crazy to think. When the NHS was first established, the NHS is about 70 years old. The NHS in this country was first established. Healthcare was delivered really differently. For those of you up front, you can kind of see this picture. I can describe it to you if not. If you've seen, what's it called? Call the Midwife. Just imagine like that entire series. So basically we have a doctor, he's smoking a cigarette in this picture, and he's going to see a patient in the home, doing a home visit. He might have a paper journal, he might have some documents with him. He might go back to his practice and then he'll put that in a filing cabinet. And that same doctor would probably have a relationship with his patients for their life and know about their family and their lifestyle. And it was a very different way of delivering healthcare. So we now see healthcare as being delivered by teams of people. And that means that everyone involved in these teams need to be able to communicate with each other. And we believe that everyone involved in a patient's care should be able to communicate with each other. And this means that healthcare now is no longer that family doctor going on that home visit and having a relationship with that one patient, but it means that healthcare is a communication industry between the nurse, between the receptionist, between the social worker, between the carer, between the person in the care home. There's lots of different people who are involved in this patient's care, and they need to be able to communicate with each other. However, we've seen that this communication is broken. And at Accurex, we're trying to build products to fix that. And especially in this remote world, we're trying to allow more care to be delivered asynchronously. Tech in healthcare is miles behind where tech is for consumer products. And healthcare deserves to have good tech, just like any industry deserves to have good tech. And we know the benefits of being able to care or to be able to communicate asynchronously. Because we can be more efficient, someone's busy at a certain time. How many times have you sat by your phone waiting for that call from the doctor only to look away for 2 minutes and that's when they call you? So being able to have communication more asynchronously can help patients, can help those caring for the patients, can help doctors, and can help the healthcare system in general be more efficient. So in 2017, Accurex's flagship product looked like this. I know it's little, so I'll describe it. So at the top here, we have some patient contact information that's pulled through from the medical record. In the middle, you can have a little message. So it's kind of like a form where you have an input field and you can type a little message. And then at the bottom, you can click send. That sends the message off to the patient as an SMS. It gets saved back into the patient's record and kind of job is done. So this is not revolutionary. So like we built this in 2016, 2017. Like SMS communication is not a revolutionary product for the 21st century. However, it was replacing letters and phone calls. And letters are really inefficient if you think in terms of healthcare spending and healthcare time. You need someone to like type up the letter, print it out, make sure that the printer is working and has paper and has ink. You then need to stuff those into envelopes. You need to make sure you have stamps to post it. You then send it off to the patient, which is another 3 to 5 days before the patient gets it. Alternatively, you then have to get on the phone with the patient. Lots of patients don't answer the phones. There's lots of missed phone calls. If you're the patient and you miss the phone call, you're like, have to call reception again, and then reception's going to tell the GP, and then they're going to try to call you back later, which can be really like a long kind of phone tag. So think of that in comparison to, I can type a little message to a patient, send it as an SMS, and I don't need to make a letter or call them on the phone. So revolutionary in terms of the efficiency it created. So by the end of 2019, our SMS product was used by 30% of GP practices. Really excited. We were founded in 2016. 3 years later, 30% of the practices in the country were using our SMS product. However, this SMS product did not equal our vision of everyone involved in a patient's care can communicate with each other. So in January of 2020, our CEO, who's this handsome man, Jacob, shared the following strategy presentation, which still sometimes haunts my dreams, at one of our quarterly offsites. This GIF is so good, so I really wish you could see it better, but it's basically a man throwing a basketball over his shoulder, being like, yeah, I made it, but it doesn't even go in the hoop. And this is a little bit what our communication platform was like. It was like, send that SMS off, patient's got normal blood test results, and I've told them, yeah, but you don't even know, has it been delivered? Did the patient get it? Have they changed their phone number? Lots of reasons why that couldn't work. So we need to move from just sending these one-off messages to managing replies. And this is definitely the gift that like haunts my dreams of like, you know, a very stressful situation of keeping all of these balls in the air and trying to like make sure that nothing gets dropped. So our users, understandably, were very weary of that. So here's a quote, kind of summation of a lot of the early user research we were doing. It said, what I love about AccuRx is that I can help so many more patients with the time I save sending a quick SMS to let them know they've got normal results. Basically, what they were telling us is that they were afraid of floodgates. They were afraid that if they already were strapped for time, even before the pandemic, healthcare was already an industry that had not enough staff, had not enough time. There was already, you know, increasing costs to healthcare. We have an increasing aging population with more comorbidities. We have new and innovative healthcare solutions, which are more expensive and more time-consuming. So healthcare was already really busy, and now we're saying, and we're going to add all these new messages that you need to manage and asynchronously care for patients. And understandably, they were afraid of floodgates. So we needed to figure out how to build something that was manageable for GPs, where GPs were in control, while also linking up more communication in the process. So here's what we learned moving from a one-way communication platform to two-way messaging, fundamentally changing how our users interact with our products. So what we learned, take small steps, do your research, and don't take everything a user says at face value. We'll start with take small steps. And this is all about taking the user on a journey. The first thing we did was not build unlimited asynchronous chat, because our users would have run away. Our user would have said, we loved your one-off product, but we definitely don't want to do that. Like, that's already more than I can manage. That's such a big behavioral change, workflow change. A lot of practices, you know, have 70, 80 staff members, maybe more if it's a big practice. It's a lot of people to completely change the way that they've been working to do this new asynchronous communication method. So we started with thinking, where are we now? We've got the GP here, and they can send an SMS to a patient. Cool, got really good traction on that, people love it, we're getting great feedback. Then we said, what if the patient could reply with structured questionnaires? So think, this is like 2020, and we're making a healthcare version of Typeform. Not a revolutionary product, not a revolutionary solution, but for a very specific niche that has very specific needs. So these structured questionnaires, they were basically like multiple choice questions like, does your asthma bother you at night, some of the time, most of the time, all the time? Does your asthma bother you during the day? And they could collect these answers, they could send back to the GP, and then they'd have some information before the patient comes in to do their annual asthma assessment that helps save time during that appointment. So that was our first step. When people started getting comfortable with that, we switched to clinician-initiated free text response. The clinician would say, I'm going to send off this SMS to a patient, and I'm going to ask one question. And the patient gets one chance to reply. So there's this whole thing, and we really wanted to create control on the GP side so they don't feel potentially inundated with clinically risky answers, especially if, say, it's a bank holiday or a weekend and they're getting in information that they weren't expecting or don't know about. So we just said, all right, you are still in control, you're in the driver's seat, but the patient can send a free text response in. And that went down really well as well. Now we're at the point where we have a product that allows patient-initiated free text messaging, which is kind of what we were hoping from in terms of the beginning. There's still a couple points which we'll go over later around how we're not quite there yet. We haven't quite won yet. But we were able to get to a point where GPs would accept, all right, I have a level of control. I can turn this free text messaging on and off, but the patient can initiate a message to me. So I'm going to give here a very rough timeline of what our adoption looked like, and I will put the caveat that January 2020 was when we started this journey. The COVID pandemic definitely accelerated a lot of our adoption because the need for digital solutions and digital communication in order to deliver remote care massively increased. So we are here in January of 2020, and 30% of GP practices in the country use our one-off SMS product. We launched the structured questionnaires, and we get to about 40%. This is February of 2020. By, I want to say, June of 2020, this is now neck deep into the first kind of chunk of COVID, we got 60% of GP practices to be using our one-off SMS product with a GP-controlled patient response. And then by the end of the year, we were about 90% of GP practices in the country using our products, including our patient-initiated free text response. So we took small steps. But along the way, very importantly, when you're taking small steps, do your research. So this is roughly what a product team looks like at Acurx. We've got their product manager, we've got a tech lead, a user researcher, a designer, a clinical lead, some product engineers. And the whole team, product engineers, designers, clinical lead, are involved to different extents in user research. And we do this because it saves a lot of time in the long run. I think a couple different people have alluded to this today, but if you think about the delta between now and when you could ship something, it's probably not that long. You can go build something. But if you built the wrong thing and then you need to go figure out why it was the wrong thing and go figure out how to fix it, especially now that some users have started using it and they've learned bad ways of using it well, even though it doesn't make any sense, you now have a much longer delta between now and when you got the thing out. So it took you quite a long time. Versus if you did that research, got the team involved in figuring out what is the right thing we want to build, we're probably going to take more time than building the right thing, than just building the thing from the start, but you've built the right thing, which means that delta is much smaller. So my team, even though we probably thought we knew this, had to really learn this the hard way. So in order to manage responses, think we had this screen that lets you send one-off messages. And we built out that screen to include an inbox or a team inbox. A team inbox, I'm thinking here, is like a shared inbox. Slack is an example of a shared inbox where you have multiple people kind of looking at the same messages, but different users will have different lenses and different permissions on different things. So in our shared inbox, we had 4 main states a message could be in. Just really briefly, a message could be open. That means that the patient has just responded and someone needs to look at that and decide what to do with it. The message could be done. That means the task is done. Maybe there's a response that's going to come back later, but more or less that task has been completed. You have a sent message. That's a message the GP has sent, maybe waiting for a response. Maybe there's no response coming in. And a scheduled message, so a message that could be or is going to be sent to the future and maybe has responses on it. So our logic was, well, we'll have this folder, the state folder. So here is a screenshot from our actual product, what it used to look like, where it was a done folder, and there's a little toggle that says you can then filter from my done to all done. And we're thinking, oh, great, simple solution. We know people kind of want to look at different views of different things, so we can filter it. A little fun fact also here, there is no emoji for a funnel, which really surprised me. I don't know what the marketing people are doing in the other room because they must love emojis and they have no funnel. But this is a little tornado, which is as close as I could get to. However, our user's mental model was not, I want to go to the state folder and then filter. Their mental model is, I want to go to my inbox, I want to go look at my stuff, and then I want to filter to the state, to my sent. So we failed to identify the right inputs before we started building. So we built this thing quickly, a done folder with a toggle between my and all. And then we had to go back and do loads of research and do lots of prototyping and learn what was the right thing. And later we built this, which is what we have now, which is we have a my inbox with lots of subsections. This is actually inspired from Outlook, which has a very similar way of solving this problem. It means that we took the long way to get there. So do your research at every step of the way, even if you think it's a little thing. To validate that little thing will help build so much confidence as you're going. So do your research. However, while you're doing your research, don't take every single thing a user says at face value. So every user wants something, and anyone you talk to, especially your enthusiastic super users, they'll have so many ideas for you about if your product could only do this, or if you added this feature, or if you did this and this, it would be so much better, and all my other friends and colleagues would also love it as much as I do. However, it's pretty easy to fall into a trap of trying to please everyone and putting everything, and oh, we'll just add that little other thing and that filter and that thing, but it's really easy to turn your product into a bit of a Frankenstein's monster. And if we look at some of the other options out there in the health tech space especially, we have a lot of products that have kind of fallen into this trap. And I would say that those products are probably massively powerful. They can do so many things, but it's really hard to know how to do any of those things because they haven't designed intuitive experiences, and they've designed things that maybe only the 1% need, rather than designing for the masses. So different users at the average GP practice will want very different things. So we have a busy GP. This busy GP is an individual contributor. They don't want to get distracted. They have a bit like a really full clinic. They probably see 16 patients just in their morning before they go to lunch. And they don't want to get distracted with all these messages about an asthma questionnaire coming in and someone else saying they've got bruising on their knee. Like, they just want to be able to focus on their own work and get their own work done. And then you also have the worried admin, who's really worried that Dr. Green's on leave this week, and what if one of their patients replies, and who's going to pick that up, and what if all of these things haven't been checked in time, and what if there's some clinical risk here? So we have two very opposing ends of a user spectrum who need to collaborate in the same shared inbox. So we did a quick win. Always do your research. We did a quick win, and we thought, all right, we'll just make some buttons that allow you to turn some notifications on and off, and depending on who you are, you can then control it by yourself. These are probably, now I cringe looking at them. These buttons, we designed them very quickly, didn't test them, but on the left there you have the failed folder, so a message that has been failed to deliver. And if you want to get notified about all of the failed folders, you'd click the notified button and the notifications would be turned on. If you didn't want to be notified about the failed folders, especially that busy GP, you'd click the mute buttons and then notifications would be turned off. I don't know if you're really quick, you might have caught it, but that means that if it says mute, you currently have notifications turned on, and if it says notify, you currently are muted, and you would click notify to have notifications turned on. Super, super confusing. This meant we had loads of different notification behaviors in the same inbox, in the same place, used by these different people. And it just meant we had lots of confused users, and our poor support team just had loads and loads of chats trying to explain this. And I would have our support team sending me Slack messages being like, can you just explain this to me again? I'm trying to help this person. They're really confused. Someone at their practice is getting some stuff, but the other person isn't, and they can't figure out why. So we took a step back and analyzed our users' jobs to be done. If you haven't heard about jobs to be done, I would definitely recommend reading up on it. There's lots of good information on the internet. But as a whistle-stop tour, jobs to be done is basically looking at your product. So here's an example of a drill. If you're selling a drill, you're not really selling a drill. What your user's job is they want to have a hole in the wall. They want a specific hole in the wall, and your drill will do that job for them. If we take a step back further, we can say, well, they don't really want a hole in the wall, they want a picture on the wall. And there's a great example of how a company solved this problem, this job to be done, by avoiding all of the faff of buying a drill, of buying a screw, of hanging things up on the wall in this way. And this is Command, which does a little sticky thing where you Velcro the painting to the wall, which is a really innovative solution to looking at that job to be done. So we thought, all right, let's think about the jobs that we need to get done. We have a busy GP, and we have a worried admin. The busy GP wants to be notified about some things. The worried admin wants to be notified about everything. And at this point, we started doing some research to see if any other products had already solved this problem. we are not the first product to have built a shared inbox. We did loads of research on Intercom. Intercom is actually the product we use for support, so we're also users of Intercom. But we looked at lots of different options so that we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. If there was good solutions out there, could we use them and repurpose them in our product for healthcare? So we decided to take inspiration from Slack's muted channel behavior. So for those of you who've used Slack before, there's an option to be in a channel, but turn notifications off. So when you want to go in, you can go look at those messages, but you wouldn't be notified every single time another message comes in. So here's a screenshot from my Slack. So the first 2 channels there are in like white, so that means that I have notifications turned on for them. And the second 2 are in gray. That means I'm in those channels, but I don't get notified about them. So we applied this same logic to our system, and it was a default for everything. So here we have the doctor's team, and we had a toggle, notifications on or off. If you had notifications on, it means you were in the team, you're getting notified about things. If you had notifications off, the team was still available to you, so you could still see any messages that were in there, because of clinical risk especially, but you wouldn't be notified of every new message that came in. And this is maybe one of my proudest moments. So this is a show and tell in early 2021 of our support team saying, we're really busy. We had just launched our COVID vaccination booking system, but not with Inbox. And as a PM, that's massive, to know that your product used to be one of the biggest support burdens, and you were able to actually figure out how to fix it so that it wasn't anymore. So what we learned, take small steps, do your research, and don't take everything a user says at face value. Often you can think of success, and especially when you zoom out, you can see these companies, and you're like, wow, they're so massively successful, and they had such a amazing journey to get there. But success hardly looks like that. It's often a big back and forth and squirrels around before you get there. So Accurx's products are now used by 98% of GPs in the country. We enable primary care staff to send over 2 million SMS to patients every week, and 30% of those SMS get responses. That means that we got to a point of success, but we had a very back and forth way of getting there. We know now that healthcare is delivered by teams of people. We've talked about how healthcare is a communication industry because all of these different people involved in a patient's care need to be able to collaborate with each other in order to know how to best care for this patient. But we still have a very long way to go before we've linked up all of those different channels of communication in healthcare. If solving tricky problems in healthcare is something that excites you, we're currently hiring. You can go to accurx.com/careers, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and very interesting presentation. We've got a couple of questions from Slido. Can you give an example of where you've spoken to a user but had to dig a little bit deeper?
Oh, really good. So there's several times we've spoken to users, and they've flat out told us, you build that, we will never use it. Or it's either, we will never use it, or, oh, I don't think I would use it, but maybe my friend would use it. And I think when you dig into that, especially if you're in an industry that has users that are a little bit maybe less tech savvy or prefer to be a little bit more safe and risk averse, you have to think a little bit about their current workflows and their current problems. And the easiest way to dig deeper is to do shadowing, which was really hard to do during the pandemic. But now that we're kind of back from the pandemic and we're able to go back into healthcare settings, sitting behind an admin person while they're doing their task and watching them click 16 buttons in 16 different ways in order to send one message off gives you a lot of insight into some of these problems and some of the things that hopefully technology can enable them to do in an easier way.
Cool. And how do you get to convince GP to try your product, like the very first product?
Oh, really good question. So how we convince GPs to try our first product, that one-off SMS product, which is a great story in of itself because we were working with one specific practice. Accurx is an EF, or Entrepreneur First, founded company, and we had a grant to work specifically with one GP practice in Oxford, and we basically spent 3 days a week sitting in their practice, watching their staff, and trying to get lots of input into what they wanted in order to build the right tech. We first kind of launched an MVP with them, got them to download. I think we broke a bunch of smart cards, which is how like GPs log into their computers, which was such a mess. But we started really small, and then we iterated several times until we got something to work, to the point where the staff at that practice started telling staff at other practice. And then we built kind of a referral scheme where you like unlocked more features if you referred a certain number of people, and it was a pretty organic growth from there. But it's really hard to convince healthcare, especially in a bottom-up approach, to adopt new technology, because most of healthcare tech is very top-down. It's all NHS digital contracts, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're building good tech, because something will have been built in silo, and then there's a big NHS contract, and then everyone's supposed to implement it, but it's not actually fulfilling the needs of the users. So we took a pretty roundabout approach to that, and were able to grow organically.
Amazing. How would you understand your users if you were in a B2B and they were hard to reach to?
In some ways, I do think of AccuRx as B2B. Like, we aren't working with customers per se. We're working with GP practices. And there is an element of needing to convince GP practices that our products are safe and that they're secure enough to be able to actually use with patient data and clinically sensitive personal information. So there is that element of building that trust. And I think a lot of it goes from like starting small, like running these experiments with small groups of people that you either have a relationship with or that they feel safe enough to be able to like tell you the feedback and tell you what it is and is not working, so that you're able to improve from there.
Did you start with one GP practice or few?
So our initial product was with one GP practice. Now, because we're in about 98% of GP practices in the country, when we're rolling out new software, we have a Facebook community that's really active, and we'll like post on our Facebook community of our users and say, we're planning to run pilots for this new feature. If anyone wants to test with us, sign up. And that way we can still keep that kind of small mentality of starting small and then being able to grow out from there.
Am I gonna steal this idea? Next question. Is there a contradiction between the fail fast and fail often and do your research philosophies to product development?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. Is there a conflict or contradiction between the fail fast and fail often and do your research philosophies? So these two philosophies, is there a contradiction between fail fast and often and do your researches?
No, really good point. I think this came up in the panel as well. I would say that like do your research is not just like do your research before you build. Like you can also be doing research, like running a design sprint is research in a way, right? Like you made a big bet, you built a really scrappy prototype, and then you get it out in front of users. I would say where the fail fast philosophy can kind of, where you can move away from that is if you try to do all of your research up front so that you like save your engineering team from having to ever make any regret work. I think accepting regret work and accepting that experiments will fail is very much part of doing your research.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like accepting that there is failure in the picture is one of the biggest thing to accept in this role. How long did it take you to revert or adjust the button mistake?
The button mistake?
Yeah.
Oh, really good question. I think it took us almost 3 or 4 months, which like we're talking about a 1.5 year timeline on this whole thing. So 3 to 4 months is really expensive. And that's 3 to 4 months of loads of support chats and like confused users who are potentially going from being like your, what's it called? The NPS, the promoter to being a detractor, because now you have this piece of like unintuitive and kind of like messy UI that even if they were a huge fan of you before, now they don't like using that, and that's kind of affecting their whole perception of your whole product suite. So it was really expensive to not have done more research and more, like a design sprint on figuring out how to solve that problem at first, rather than thinking, oh, we'll just put in this button as a quick win, and then actually causing lots of problems from that.
So you advise to basically do the discovery and research before doing anything, even if it looks like a quick win.
Yeah, Absolutely. I think that quick wins are a little bit of a misnomer. I think it's really easy to listen to user feedback or have ideas that come up through different meetings and be like, oh, that won't be so expensive to build. We'll just build it and put it in and be done with it. And if you haven't gotten the copyright on it, if you haven't necessarily even gotten the idea in front of a couple users, even as a Figma, as a click-through prototype, I think it's really risky because it could go well, but there's lots of cases where it's not going to go well, and that's going to cost you in the long run.
Okay, thank you, Anne. That was last question. Thank you very much.